Welcome everybody, PKFT1 here, and again, I have another special guest for you guys this week. We got Fither here.
What's up?
So, a while back when I finished Persona 5 Royal, I sent a message to Fither. It was right as I was starting my YouTube channel because I really wanted to kind of get integrated into like the Persona community, specifically the YouTube community, and Fither was always like, you know, the one that I listened to just because his perspectives were always so, not just funny, but I think actually really like introspective into different characters and just the games in general. And so I really thought it would be fun to do a discussion with him on the changes in Royal. And as many of you probably know, he just finished Royal recently and he reached out to me. So we wanted to kind of run through our thoughts, kind of an open-ended discussion. And with that being said, I'm just going to let you take the lead on this, Fither.
Yeah, sure. And also, we should mention this is going to be split up into two parts. The first part is going to be on PK's channel here. And this is kind of like the journey through the first and second semesters with all the changes in Royal, obviously. And then on my channel, we're going to be talking about the third semester stuff.
Yeah, perfect. So yeah, make sure to check out both parts. I think a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about here is probably going to have a lot to do with, you know, some of the story beats, but a lot of quality of life stuff as well. So with that being said, when you played Royal, what was kind of the first big thing you noticed that was different, that stuck out to you?
Oh man, like I think the thing that kind of smacked me in the face the hardest at first was like just Kasumi's integration. And Kasumi was a character that I was slightly worried about because Atlus has kind of a reputation for putting in like characters that are not very well received. You know, we have like Marie is of course the classic example. So I was always kind of worried about Kasumi. And I think she definitely does have this kind of like new edition energy because like you go through the introductory part where you're in Sai's palace and she kind of shows up at the end. So that was a little bit kind of jarring and that made me afraid that Kasumi was going to be like, her role was going to kind of overstep the original game sense.
Right.
But she's surprisingly integrated pretty well into it. Like beyond that point, she feels pretty natural.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I totally agree because I don't know, there's that whole setup. I mean, like you said, everybody kind of thinks of Marie, and you do introduce Marie to everybody, but Kazumi just feels like, more of a natural insert, being a student that's already there, kind of running into Joker from time to time. I don't know, I can't remember exactly when in the story she actually gets to really meet and talk with everyone else. I don't even know, is it until, maybe it's not until like New Year's. No, you see her on vacation when you're in Hawaii, right?
Yeah, I think the vacation is the first time that she really talks to, like, the other thieves. Because, you know, you see her in the school quite often, but she doesn't really talk to anybody else until around then.
Right. And I think she's kind of interesting because, in a way, they tie her almost more to her relationship, obviously, between Joker and then Maruki as well. And she kind of becomes the key between everything that kind of, you know, subsequently happens. So I do feel that while she may have not had, you know, as much time to spend with the rest of the cast, you know, her entire purpose is still served by building that relationship with the protagonist. And then, of course, she gets some time in the third semester to spend with everybody as well. And then her relationship to Maruki, I think is really kind of an interesting... I mean, it gives you as much perspective as you need on Maruki and his powers and everything. So I do think that she was much better implemented than some of the characters I've seen before.
Yeah, it's at least a more natural go-through. Like, I always find this interesting whenever I ask people who play, like, the expanded editions of games first, like, you know, Catherine Full Body or Persona 4 Golden. I always like asking them, how natural did you think that this character was in the story? And the answers people give are very varied. It's either like, I literally couldn't even tell, to it was very apparent they were a new addition. So I don't know, I'm kind of interested to learn, like, if people felt Kasumi was really naturally integrated, because at least for me, I felt like she more or less was.
Right. So I have a question for you, because I'm just remembering this, and I think you're right, because this was like the first thing I noticed was there's that point where you're in the car with man, it's been so long since I've played. I'm so stupid. Why can't I think of anybody's name? Sojiro. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you're in the car with Sojiro, and he's talking to you, and he mentions like, oh yeah, and then there was that girl who was in that accident, blah, 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 blah. And he's talking about Sumire, right? Or I guess the real Kazumi. But did that like stick out to you at all when you were first playing?
It did not. I'm pretty sure I paid no particular mind to that. I just felt like that was just some rambling Sojiro had in the original game. But yeah, going back and thinking about it, that's totally what he was talking about.
And I remember that stuck out to me, and I knew it had to, because I knew it was new, and I was like, that has to have to do with Kazumi, or Kasumi, or however you pronounce her name, but I wasn't quite sure how it was going to tie in. I thought at that point, because I knew, you know, about some of the spoilers and stuff. Well, not all the spoilers, but, you know, the stuff that Atlas spoiled themselves. Yeah. And so I knew she was a character that would appear later in the game, and so that there was something going on weird in the latter part of the game where characters were coming back and stuff that were supposedly dead and everything, and so I'm like, wait, is she dead? Like, the whole time I thought that, like, she was, like, not actually there until, of course, it's explained at the end of the game. So I knew she was, like, there was something weird going on with her. I just had no idea what it was, just because of that throwaway line from Sojiro. So I had nothing to go off of, but it did make her suspicious to me, I guess, from the beginning, which I guess in her own way she is, but aside from that, anyhow, that was the first thing to me that really, like, got my gears going.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kazumi, just as a character, I think she's, I don't know, in a lot of ways she reminds me of, I don't know, like, I almost want to say a toned down version of Rise. Like, she's, you know, obviously she's very attached to the protagonist when she kind of gets to know you, but her character, of course, evolves as you get to the end of the game, and maybe we can save that more for the latter part of the discussion, or sorry, the second part of the discussion. But what is your perspective on her as just regular Kazumi?
I liked her a lot. I would say, like, out of the kind of now main Persona 5 girls, she's probably maybe my second or third favorite. I'd say I like her about as much as, like, An or Makoto. She's in that kind of tier, but I definitely enjoyed her.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, I think a lot of it for me, it was just nice to have a fresh face that you were still, you know, kind of getting to know and everything, and kind of broke up the monotony of, you know, the characters that you already have gone through the confidant ranks with. And so I thought she was interesting enough until, you know, that latter point. But let's see, what else is there to talk about, like, early on in the game? So I know at least another big thing for me is, you know, you're going through Kamoshida's palace. Yeah. And you start to see, like, things you never saw before, like corridors and things. And then you're slowly introduced to things like will seeds. How did you feel about palace exploration?
So I liked all the little changes they made. Like, the grappling hook is obviously one of the big ones. They get a lot of usage out of that grappling hook. And if I'm not mistaken, like, the only time that shows up is in the original game is in, like, menu transitions is when he has that grappling hook. Like, I think that's where, in Smash Brothers, that's part of Joker's moveset. I think that's where the inspiration for that comes from. But yeah, it's such a minor thing that they ended up turning into something really cool. And I think it adds a lot to the kind of, like, thief dynamic they have going on.
Oh, absolutely. I liked the whole idea of every now and then you would just, like, be running around in a palace, and, you know, you would run past something and you would see, like, the little grappling graphic that would pop up, and you would go up there and you would just want to explore. And sometimes I was surprised how far off the, like, main path it would take me. And I like being able, even if it's really kind of simple, I like being able to have multiple paths to have to think about when I was exploring, because it never took you too far, but it also felt like worthwhile to explore for the will seeds. And so to me, at least, it made the palace feel, I don't know, well, any of the palaces, just that much more dynamic in how you could explore them. And there was never a point in the game where I really wanted to leave until I had collected all the will seeds. So I think just because of, and we'll probably get more into that later, just because of what you're able to get from the will seeds, it really felt worth it to explore the palaces in their entirety. And in some ways it rewarded you for all that extra time you would end up spending in the palace itself.
Yeah, I really liked the will seeds. I thought they were a fun kind of like mini treasure that you could get. If I have one complaint about them, and this is the weirdest thing ever to complain about, it's the fact that the rewards you get from them are too good.
Yeah.
I felt like whenever I got them and I read them and one of them is like, oh, nullifies all weaknesses. I was like, is this right? Like, where's the drawback? So I ended up not using most of them. Towards the end, I was kind of like, okay, yeah, I could actually use this. But man, those are some really good abilities those like will seed accessories give you.
Yeah. I definitely ended up, yeah, like you said, there were definitely some where I was like, oh, that seems really powerful, or there were some where I was like, oh, that's just a really cool ability, and I would just equip it to somebody. And I liked just being able to, because there's so many, but you can only have so many equipped, obviously. And
yeah.
But it was still cool to be able to think, okay, when is this going to be useful? And I just enjoyed not knowing what you were going to get from it, and knowing, okay, this could be really cool or really helpful, and collecting all of them just to see, so you could take them to, because who do you take them to? Is it Jose?
Yeah, Jose is the one who like upgrades them.
Right. And oh man, we got to talk about that too. And kind of seeing what it is was always exciting for me. So again, it was just one of those things where it just felt like an extra reward, and also it was just fun to see new parts of the palace, even if it wasn't anything that was that visually stunning. Just having that extra corridor or something to run down, or that extra kind of mini boss battle in front of the door, was sometimes just fun, and made you feel like you were almost doing like a little side mission. So I liked it.
Yeah, I did too. They were a nice little addition.
Speaking of, since we're kind of talking about buffs and things like that, obviously combat is something that's been pretty overhauled. At least it felt so to me, but I hadn't played Persona for like, well, at least Persona 5 for like 3 years in between. So how did you feel? How did you feel going into combat?
So I was not expecting, I feel like this is kind of something you can apply to the entirety of P5R, but I was not expecting that many changes. But I really, really enjoy all the new additions. Everything from like the reworked gun ammo, because in the original Persona 5, guns were like this thing that you used them, obviously, but I ended up with this kind of syndrome where I was like, yeah, but I don't want to use my 3 bullets that I get per dungeon.
Right.
So I would often end up just barely using them. But in this game, they just refresh every time, which is so much better.
Oh, yeah.
And then there's stuff like, the show times, there's the changes to technicals. I think my favorite single thing that they need to bring this to every Megami Tensei going forward are the Persona traits. I think those are awesome.
Okay, you're going to have to refresh my memory on Persona traits. I'm trying to remember. Yeah. Was that just like the natural... You know what? Just explain it. I'll probably remember it if you do.
Yeah, sure. So every Persona comes with its own... I don't think all of them are unique, but most of them are unique. A unique trait that's just like a passive buff to something. So it'll be like, this Persona has whatever, increased fire damage or whatever it may be, higher chance to stun. And I think that really does a great job adding just that slight extra bit of like, choice and trying to maximize these Personas. Because it's like, oh man, which trait do I want now? Because, now there's an extra layer of the inheritance of like, this, now I have really good skills, he has good stats, and now I have a good trait on him.
Sure.
So I think that really adds a lot, and it also just makes them all feel that slight bit more unique. Because when you really stop and think about it, there's not a huge amount of difference between like one persona to the next other than the skills you give them. They're kind of just like templates that you can shape stuff around. But I think the traits do a really good job giving them their own identity. So now it's not just like, oh yeah, Jack Frost, like what's the difference between him and another persona? Oh, well, the difference is he has frigid bloodline. So now all of his ice stuff is cheaper to use. So I just think that's like a really cool idea.
Yes, now that you say that, I do remember that. And I think it was just one of those things where, and I think this brings up another point for me, was there were some things that just felt so natural and so intuitive in how they were implemented that I think I started to forget what stuff was from the base game and what stuff was unique to Royal.
Yeah, I did too. I would have these little moments where I was like kind of second guessing myself when something would happen in a fight, and I'd be like, "Is that how it worked?" Like, but there was a lot of fun in that, just kind of like sort of rediscovering the combat.
Oh yeah, I mean like, Baton Pass just becomes so ridiculously powerful in how it works, and like you were saying with technicals and follow-ups and everything, and being able to, you know, kind of construct in your head, okay, how am I going to get the biggest combo I can out of this specific battle? I don't know, like to me at least it felt much more I'm trying to think of the word. I'm not always good with words when I'm describing how I feel. I feel like the word intuitive just keeps coming. It just felt like there was a little bit more strategy going into it, even if it did make me feel like I was able to just get through battles in no time. There was that, you know, sense of pride, I guess I had when I would execute something really cool, or I got through a battle that was typically difficult with relative ease from just choosing the right combination of personas and or moves and everything and making that all work. I don't know, there's a sense of satisfaction. That's what I'm trying to say. And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about that. And another thing with that was they have the entire overhauled persona fusions and executions and everything they added with what did they call it? Was it a fusion alarm? Is that what it was?
Yeah, the fusion alarms, which I really like as a thing, because like anybody who's played any of the Megami Tensei games will tell you that fusion accidents are either like this wonderful blessing or horrific curse. And it really just depends. Like, it's an accident. It just happens. But I think being able to like control when you get an accident is like, it's kind of an oxymoron, you know, a controlled accident, but I feel like it just works out better.
Oh yeah. I have to say, being somebody who I would consider a fairly casual like RPG fan, I never usually get really into the mechanics of a game unless I'm like really interested in it. And Persona, I'm still, you know, even though I enjoy the games, I feel like it's one of those things where, you know, I'm not in my element when I'm trying to fuse personas. I'm not always the best at it, and I don't always understand it. However, I think fusion alarms for me really served as something to motivate me to just get me into the Velvet Room so that I could experiment and so that I could see what happens. And I think anybody who, at least for me, like that kind of got me more interested in, you know, all the different types of demons that Megami Tensei has to offer. And so when I eventually started SMT4, I was much more interested in the whole idea of fusion. And I think that this would be a perfect entry for anybody who wants to get into Megami Tensei, just because it gives you that much more reason to go in there. And for somebody who, again, never really cared before, the fusion alarms really made me spend a lot more time just looking into those things and experimenting and see what I could make happen. So I really enjoyed it myself.
Oh yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed, just like the act of fusing in P5R is so much fun. I think this is the closest I've ever gotten to completing a compendium. I got pretty close. I had like 93% of the compendium done. There's just a couple little stragglers that I didn't get, but I was pretty intent on getting like almost every new persona I could.
Oh, sure. And that, you know, that's a thing in and of itself, is just the whole collection aspect, and it kind of broadens your horizons. Now, I have a question for you, because again, I'm not really up to date on this. Do you have any idea, like, how many new demons were added or anything like that?
I couldn't give you an exact count. There's definitely a good handful of new ones that have like new models. Yeah, I'm not sure exactly how many. Most of them are kind of backloaded towards the end of the game, which is fine, but there's a good amount of new ones in there.
And do you have one that's either been your favorite or one that you tend to go back to whenever you play?
Well, my favorite demon is Black Frost. He's absolutely like, every playthrough, I'm always like, I need to get a Black Frost for every Megami Tensei.
Sure.
And without fail, I've always gotten one. So, yeah, definitely Black Frost is like he's my boy.
Yeah, I'm terrible with remembering demons. It's one of those things, and I think you've talked about this, where you just swap them out, and you know, I might every now and then get kind of attached to one if I use it for too long, but I'm terrible with you know, really memorizing their names and everything. I just have to describe them by how they look. But I think another part of combat that also really helps along with new personas and baton passing is just showtime attacks in general.
Showtimes are awesome.
Yeah, why don't you talk to me about your experience with showtimes?
Yeah, sure. So I had obviously seen a couple of the showtimes because, like, I'm pretty sure when the game was being teased, they showed them off. But it was kind of like, it had been so long in between those being revealed and me actually playing the game, I pretty much forgot them. So it was kind of nice being able to see them, like, pretty much with a fresh mentality, and they're really, really cool.
Oh, yeah. And I think one of the big things for me, again, another motivating factor of because how do you get showtime attacks again? You have to...
They just unlock throughout the course of the story.
Okay, that's what it was.
Yeah, I don't think you really have to do anything. The characters kind of just like, I'm not sure if it's set to a fixed date or what, but the characters will just be like, you want to do a sick combo attack?
Oh, that's
like,
right,
yeah,
that's
dude.
right. They would like run into each other in the subway.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was like a big factor for me was, okay, they unlocked this move, I need to see it. And so you would, you know, first thing I would do is, you know, try to run through Mementos, or maybe it wasn't Mementos. Don't you have to go through the palace for it to activate? Isn't there like a point in the palace or something that they talk to each other and they're like, now's the time?
The first one you get, it's like a scripted thing you get in Kaneshiro's palace, but I'm pretty sure you can just do them whenever, as long as they're like, they activate. Sure.
And I'm trying to think of all the different ones, because there's so many. The ones that always stick out in my memory will be, you know, Queen and Skull, their one where they're in the desert or whatever. The one that's like, what's that stupid show called? I can't think of anything. Fist of the North Star. Yeah. I know they showed that one in the trailer, but that one still always was cool to me. Did you have one that was really like a favorite?
Man, they're all really good. I think the one that like kind of brought me the most delight to see was the Makoto and Haru one, where they just WWE on a shadow.
That's right. I forgot about that one completely. Yeah, I think that was like one of the ones where I only got to use like once or twice. I remember the one that I always kept getting was the Anin and Morgana one, which is still great. Yeah. I loved that one. And they would just do little things to keep it fresh every now and then, where they would just change up some of the lines in each showtime. So every time you use it, every now and then they'd say a little different piece of dialogue. And yeah,
my favorite when it comes to that is like the Yusuke and Ryuji one, because every time Yusuke says some different goofy thing, it's really funny.
Yeah, that was the one, because I was playing so I was playing simultaneously with my my friend, and we would call each other after each playthrough just to kind of see, hey, where are you? Where are you? Did you unlock this yet? Or did you unlock this yet? And so I remember we would talk about like showtime attacks, and she would tell me like something goofy that Yusuke said, or I would tell her something goofy that Yusuke said that time. It was just funny, like going back and forth talking about our reactions to certain things. Because I think that's just part of it, is just seeing it on screen, whether or not it's, you know, super effective or not. Being able to see characters interact in new ways during battle, it just breaks up again the monotony of the typical battle, and it just makes it a lot more fun. So
Yeah, I think it also does a good bit to kind of like flesh out the relationships between these characters. Because one gripe I always kind of had about P5 is that like they're always kind of together as a group. You know, it's like you basically never see like, I don't know, two random characters like Ryuji and Futaba just like doing something. And that's part of why I like Persona 3 so much, is because they all have these kind of independent relationships. But I think just those little scenes of the two characters being like, hey man, you want to like do something radical with me? And the other character being like, yeah, dude. I think that does a lot to just kind of like make the Phantom Thieves feel more like individuals.
Oh yeah, that's been something that I think, at least for me, I've always noticed. Maybe this is something that the fandom has talked about, but I can't say I've read too much into it, is the idea of these kind of interpersonal relationships between each of the individual Phantom Thieves, and kind of seeing them all interact with one another. And yeah, I think you're right. As small of a thing as it may be in terms of how it connects them, it does, because you see it so frequently, it does almost feel like that bond becomes more prominent throughout the game because you've seen that thing over and over again. So whether or not that's intentional, I think you're right. And I think, at least for me, I wasn't focusing so much on that aspect of the game where it's like, well, I would have liked if some of these characters interacted more with one another rather than just talking about themselves in terms of the Phantom Thieves, but actually having those connections. Speaking of, you know, moments where you get dialogue between characters, we have Mementos, which was also pretty heavily overhauled. What did you have any favorite part of Mementos or any favorite change?
Oh man, so I spent a lot of time in Mementos in like P5R just getting different personas and stuff to fuse, but it's always fun just seeing the new dialogue. Like, this is more third semester stuff, but the dialogue Akechi has is really funny. Because he's just like, he just doesn't want to be there, and I think that's great.
Yeah, and if you guys haven't checked out Fither's video on Akechi, and this will be something, again, we talk about more in the second video, but he goes pretty in-depth into a lot of the evolution of Akechi in Royal. And for anybody who knows me, like, Akechi has always been a character. I don't even necessarily like him, but his character just always makes me laugh. And
yeah,
so
he has like this weird, funny energy to him. Like, even though I'm not particularly a fan of him, at least in the original Persona 5.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, what was that? Something just fell in my house. It must be Goro coming to get me. Yeah, like, Goro's a character I always found, like, even though I didn't like him, there's at least a weird sort of comedy involved with him that was probably not intentional. You just slip him into conversations and he's just funny. I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah, I think that was always a big part of it for me, was because, okay, I'm this weird person. Well, I shouldn't say weird because I know the fandom does it all the time, but like when I watch a game or play a game or whatever it is, and I see characters interacting, I get this kind of idea of their personality in my head. And so in the original Persona 5, when you see, you know, Akechi make the whole transition into Crazy Town and stuff, that was like, to me, I was like, oh my gosh, I want to see more of just Akechi kind of being his true self, you know, and being a jerk to everybody. And I don't know what it is about those types of characters. It's kind of like, I don't know, it's like, because I think you've played Danganronpa, right? It's kind of, it reminds me of like Tagami and kind of his relationship with Naegi. And for some reason, that character who is, you know, kind of reluctantly working with the protagonist, but also just being a jerk about everything, whether or not that's a trope, I'm sure it is, something about that character always has appealed to me. And so to be able to see that later in the game, especially with just interactions with everybody and him not having that, what's the word, that facade that he had on, was probably one of my favorite parts of the entire game, because that was the Akechi that I really liked, that we saw very briefly in base Persona 5. So that, and they play it up to a comedic level, of course, which I think makes it even better. And throughout Mementos, there's, what's all there? There's stamps, there's...
Yeah, all the little Jose stuff, like the flowers, there's stamps. Jose will just show up from time to time. Dude, every time Jose rolled up in his little car, I was like, ooh, yeah!
Oh
I don't know.
yeah.
I just like seeing Jose. He's so cute.
Even like the UI and everything just for him is so unique to him.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I mean, Jose is just an interesting character. What is your perspective on him? Because you get so little information about him.
Yeah, okay. So it's funny you bring that up because when Jose was kind of first revealed, I actually put up a video speculating about what he is, and my going theory was that Jose was essentially Pinocchio. And that's a theory that I still kind of hold to because, like, he clearly has a sort of sculpted face. You know, his ears are, like, rounded. He seems to be missing his nose. He has all the motifs going on with wishes and stars and stuff. And basically, I figured out Jose's name. You know who Geppetto is from Pinocchio,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
So basically, Jose's name is like the version of Joseph, and Joseph in Italian is Geppetto, basically.
Oh, really?
I might be messing that up. There's like a 3-step correlation going from the name Geppetto to Jose to Joseph or whatever, but so that was kind of my theory, is that like Jose would be revealed as basically being Pinocchio, and then we kind of learn nothing about him.
Well, that's the thing is like, well, when I played the game, I never looked, I guess, deep enough to get the fight with Jose. So I never got that.
Yeah, I never fought him either. I had to go and look it up later, like what happens in that fight.
Same. And even then, you get so little context, and we know he keeps talking about his master, which I assume he's referring to Igor. And so, what? Let me ask you this: what do you think the future of Jose is?
Oh man. So I'm pretty sure in his dialogue he mentions a she when he's talking about like whoever sent him on this task to go like learn about humans. So my assumption is that Jose is in fact a little velvet child because, you know, he's got the blue, he's got the yellow eyes.
Sure.
So he clearly has some association with the Velvet Room. My going theory is that he either has something to do with Lavenza or maybe Elizabeth or Margaret.
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Because here's another question: is what do you think the entire star and moon aesthetic is about? Because when I see like stars, or I think Night Sky, I think Persona 3. And so, you know, Elizabeth does come to mind. However, I mean, this is, I think, a popular theory, but I do think, like, every time I think of it, like, oh my gosh, that makes too much sense, is everybody knows that, you know, Igor's voice actor in Japan passed away, and I guess Japan has a weird thing about replacing old voice actors, and
yeah, they're very, very hesitant about doing that, especially if it's somebody who's playing that role for a long time.
Right. And we know, I think from what I read in Japan, anytime Igor appears in Royal, they just reuse dialogue from, I guess, like recycle it from earlier in the game or other games. And of course, Lavenza does most of the talking. And so, you know, I think from what I've seen, the consensus generally is that maybe he's the next Igor even. And, you know, and the reason I think this is, well, he has the nose. He's obviously, like you said, like Pinocchio. Is his nose gonna grow? Is he growing a mini tiny Igor nose? and he's got the eggshell, so he's like, you know, he's just been hatched or whatever. He's new. Maybe he's the replacement. Maybe he's related to Philemon. I don't know. But I think you're right. If he does refer to a female master, and like I said, he has that star and moon aesthetic, you know, maybe it is something like Elizabeth or Lavenza. It just seems like such an odd addition, right?
Yeah, he is very weird. I was expecting like a flat out, you know, Lavenza to show up and be like, oh, my brother Jose, or whatever it may be, but he's kind of just like a mystery.
Right. And it's one of those things where it's like, obviously they're setting him up for something in the future. It's just, I can't wrap my head around quite what it's going to be and why they would do it so early if it was not prepping you for something really big, you know?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to go too deep into it, but yeah, I think there's so much discussion to be had on that, and lots of theories, and I'm sure we'll see eventually what the fruits of that are, but very fascinating. I've probably spent too much time thinking about Jose. However, the abilities, not the abilities, the power-ups that he gives you in Mementos are pretty crazy. Because you can get
Dude, they're extremely useful. Dude, just like a flat % increase on how much experience you get? That's nuts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that, because you could upgrade that, and then, what was it? Yen, and there was something else.
Items.
Experience yen. Oh, yeah, items. Which was also extremely helpful. And then, of course, you can just get all sorts of SP items from him. Like, everything from Snuff Souls to, I can't remember the rest of them. And that was just useful in general, too, to be able to just stock up on those.
Yeah, he sells useful stuff. Like, you would kind of expect he just has, like, some dinky, random, whatever it may be. But no, he's packing, like, the Snuff Souls, the Soma. He's got, like, all kinds of good stuff.
And the cool thing about the way they use him in Mementos is they just want you to go deeper. And so they're like, okay, he might just randomly appear on this, floor. You never know. And it gives you just that much more incentive to kind of get through Mementos, because I'm not sure if you're the same, but when Mementos was in the original game, I think everybody kind of dragged their feet having to go into Mementos to grind. Whereas this time, it felt like there was that constant reward you were getting every time you would go in.
Yeah, they definitely did a good job at least making it a place you maybe want to go to slightly more. It's not exactly like a vacation destination, but there's at least that little bit more encouragement to, like, yeah, let's go to Mementos.
Yeah. And of course, I know they did more. I mean, obviously there's the updated music. And that, is something in and of itself that I just enjoyed, where it would slightly change as you got deeper, and it was just much more enjoyable to listen to than the original Mementos theme. And then, what was the other thing? So I got a question. I don't remember this. Were the random events on floors, were those always in Persona? Like, you know how, like, you could, like, fall through a floor or something randomly? Or, there would be one where there would be extra shadows or something. You remember all those changes that would do depending on the floor you were on? Sometimes there'd be, like, a random event. Was that in the original?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a new Royal thing, because I don't remember that happening in P5, where, Futaba would be like, oh, this floor's different.
Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure about that. Is there anything else in Mementos that that you can think of that you wanted to touch upon?
Not particularly. Other than, like, Jose and a couple little things, it's pretty much just the same Mementos. Like, I think I have kind of a problem with it than some people. It's not particularly interesting, but it's like, the battles go by so fast that it's like, it's whatever. It's fine.
Right. Yeah. And sorry, I'm just looking at some stuff. So we've talked about all sorts of different things, and we still have characters and everything to talk about. So let's talk about some of the new characters. We briefly touched upon Kazumi. So, if I'm not mistaken, your favorite new addition character-wise was Maruki, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Maruki is not only my favorite, like, new character in Persona 5 Royal, I'd say he's probably in my top, like, 5-ish Persona characters at this point.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Me too. He's just one of those characters that's instantly likable, and you're just curious about the entire way through. Because he's going to be up to something. So, before the third semester, as you were getting to know Maruki, what were you thinking about him? Did you have... I know you've predicted what you thought he would be doing, but did you think he was up to something malicious, or did you think he was just kind of suspicious?
Well, I was kind of sort of spoiled on the fact that he was, in fact, the antagonist of the third semester, but it was pretty much only that. I just knew he was the bad guy. But what I think I was expecting was definitely a much more malevolent sort of character. But no, he's just like a nice guy.
Yeah, that's I think funny enough, that's the biggest twist of all, right? That he isn't
absolutely.
evil.
Because, like, I think Persona kind of has this problem, at least for, like, the 3, 4, 5, of, like, seemingly, I don't know how to put this, not, like, benevolent, but the characters like Izanami, for example, or Yao Dabouth being, like, pretending as if there's some good in what they're doing, when they're kind of just, like, assholes. But that's kind of what I was expecting with Maruki, was just, like, wahaha, I claim to be doing something good, but no, I'm evil actually. But he never falls into that trap, which I think is great.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, again, it's one of those things where they build him up where you're just, I figured he was going to be involved. They talk about he leaves from school at some point, and, you know, I figured, okay, well, he's obviously returning. I don't think I ever actually got spoiled on the fact that he was the, like, final villain. I mean, it became fairly obvious early on that he was at least going to be involved later.
Yeah.
But the thing about it was it didn't really matter to me because just going and talking to him was enjoyable enough, and getting to know his character and kind of his background was really interesting because you're kind of like trying to wrap your head around why he wants to know all this stuff. And why would he go to somebody like you know, and ask all these seemingly philosophical questions about what would one do in this circumstance, you know?
Yeah, I think it's really well kind of crafted just from the perspective of, like, even if you don't finish the Confidant, at least for me, I don't feel like there would be some great lingering kind of wondering about, like, oh man, what did he mean by this? Because, like, you can kind of finish the Confidant and just think, oh yeah, that was just a good Confidant.
Right.
So I think that's kind of part of the beauty of just how he's built up, is the fact that, like, he's not that suspicious, just enough to kind of be like, what did you mean by that? But not enough to be like, all right, well, I'll see you later. I'm the main bad guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing about that was, you know, obviously before we get into that into the third semester, you know, there's all these new story elements, so you get all these new moments where you're kind of spending time with these new characters. So you have, I think the first time you really spend any meaningful time with Kasumi was, you're at the park.
Yeah, you're cleaning up trash.
Right, yeah, you're cleaning up trash, and you sit on the bench with her, and she kind of talks to you, and she has that moment where you find out her name by looking at, like, I don't know what she drops something, if I remember right, and you pick it up, and you see her name. ID. Right, and they're very sneaky with how they do that whole ordeal of how you learn her name and everything, and then, of course, I think Maruki's there as well, and there's various moments like this that they just add into the story. Did you have any favorite moments from just the, like, base story of, like, new stuff they added?
At least for me, definitely, like, all the new Maruki scenes. I really like seeing him kind of show up as, like, a substitute teacher every now and again, because I think that's, like, the perfect opportunity for him to kind of talk about weird cognitive stuff. Like, I don't remember if those exact questions were in the original Persona 5 or not. I'm pretty sure they were all new, but it's just interesting having him show up and talk to you about, like, weird psychological concepts and whatever else it happens to be, because I find that stuff really interesting.
Oh, definitely. And, you know, you get that idea that, you know, he's there to help the students. And, again, he seems genuine about it, and he's meeting with Kasumi, and there's that point in the story that you overhear all sorts of stuff where they're threatening about taking away, what was it, like Kasumi's scholarship, and she's very upset, and then she kind of runs out on you when you go to talk to her afterwards. And then she shows up at what was it supposed to be? It was like a stadium they were building or something.
Yeah, I think it was a stadium.
And she's there, and she accidentally activates the nav or something. And what was your impression of this entire? You know what scene I'm talking about, obviously.
Yeah. When you go into Maruki's palace for the first time.
What were your thoughts when you went there? I guess you probably knew it was Maruki's palace, right?
I did not actually. I didn't know it was like Maruki's palace specifically. I wasn't sure what it was. Like, looking back retrospectively, it's pretty obvious. Yeah, that was Maruki's palace, but I wasn't really like, oh yeah, that's Maruki's palace for sure. Because I really wasn't sure how his, like, villainy would be integrated into the third semester. Like, I didn't know what he was up to, so.
So, did you have any theories at the time as to whose palace it was, or what you thought?
My initial kind of thought was that it had something more directly to do with Kasumi. Like, I wasn't sure if maybe it was her, her sister, or it was her dad or somebody. That would have been kind of an interesting twist. It's like, yeah, my dad has a palace, but
Right.
yeah, no, other than that, I was just kind of like, I kind of put it to the back of my mind because you're going back to it eventually. So I was kind of like, yeah, I'll just let the game surprise me.
Yeah, it was funny because I got the whatever the special edition or the Phantom Thieves edition was of Royal, and it came with a 10-song soundtrack.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had played up to that point, and I was like in my car or something, and I put in the CD and I was listening to it, and then I started looking at the track names, and I realized the one was from the Palace because I recognized it, and I was like, oh. And I saw the title of the track, and it was Gentle Madman, and to me I was like, wait, Akechi? Like, that made way more sense to me from the track title. I was like, that
being
sounds...
in Akechi's palace is not a bad theory.
Right, and so it being titled Gentle Madman, I'm like, that seems like Akechi, and so I had, like, completely forgotten, like, that Maruki could even be involved at that point, and it wasn't until I called up my friend, and I was talking to her, and I was asking, like, whose palace do you think it is? And then she's like, oh, it's Maruki's, and, like, it's obviously Maruki's, and I was like, oh, yeah, you're right, that does make sense. But it's funny how it could have fit, like, at least from what you see at the beginning, like, really either of them technically, but it made way more sense once she said that. So after that I was like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But even knowing all the stuff I knew, it still kind of threw me off. So I definitely enjoyed kind of having that tease to get me thinking about the third semester, because by then you're like, if I remember right, by that time in the game, I was really craving, like, the third semester, because I knew it was coming, and I was just like, I just want to get there, I just want to see what's there. Did you ever have that, like, where you just really wanted to get to the new content?
See, I really enjoyed the kind of ride through the original game through, like, the first and second semesters. I feel like towards, like, after Sai's Palace, that's when I was kind of starting to get like, okay, yeah, I kind of want to see the new stuff at this point. Because, like, the final kind of bit of it is relatively unchanged. The only thing that I think is really altered is, like, the ending of Akechi's Confidant. But other than that, it's more or less the same, at least until, like, after you beat Yaldabaoth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. And I think it surprised me in some ways, like, because, like, you go through the scene where, you know, well, actually, let's back up. Before I go through that, there are some hints that are given to you along the way of, you know, some of the changes. We've already talked about some of them. But I wanted to talk about Akechi's new confidant.
Yes.
And kind of that entire build-up. Because they allow you to... Because I think he goes to the jazz club with you. And then what point is it that he decides that he's going to kind of give you a hint of his true self and duel you? Do you remember what rank that was?
I think it's going from his 7 to his 8, because I remember, like, towards the end is when it goes from 9 to 10. I'm pretty sure it's his 8, when he's kind of like, yeah, I hate you, actually.
Right, yeah, no, you're totally right. So, what... Did you have, like, something in that confidant that really kind of changed your opinion on Akechi, or was it not until the third semester?
The third semester is definitely when the big shift happened. I feel like, in general, like, Akechi's new confidant is so much better than how it was in P5. Just, like, those naturally progressing confidants never feel that natural. So I think just being able to say, yeah, today I want to hang out with Akechi, like, really does a lot. And you spend more, like, actual time with him. You know, you go to the jazz club, you hang out at the bathhouse and whatever. Whereas in the original, it was a lot more just kind of like, oh yeah, me and Akechi were in the same place at the same time, I guess. So now our bond is deepened. So I think it's kind of just like the being able to choose hanging out with Akechi that really does a lot. Because then it's like, he's more like your actual friend.
Right. Yeah. And I think for me, like you said, yeah, you get to do all these things with him, and Akechi does all sorts of things that are unforgivable, like, as a character in the story. Whether or not you like Akechi or not, you can't, like, excuse all the stuff he does, even though I know a lot of people do.
Oh, people try. Trust me. I've been
Right.
dealing with it for 3 years.
But they do build him up before his, you know, big quote-unquote reveal as the villain, where they kind of try to make him more sympathetic. Like, they already try to make him kind of this pitiful character that goes bad because of various conflicting reasons. And, but I remember, like, because what's he talk about in the bathhouse? He talks about, like, his mom.
Yeah, he talks about his mom and how he grew up in an orphanage and stuff.
Right. And they really try to get you to feel for Akechi. Did that do anything for you to, like...
No, not in the slightest. I feel like if I had played P5R fresh and I didn't, like, this was my first time going through it, it probably might have done a little bit of something, but it's like, I already kind of know he's a murder man,
right.
So it doesn't really work, you know?
Right. Yeah, that was kind of the same with me, where it was just kind of like, all right, whatever. I mean, it was interesting, but it wasn't anything that really changed my opinion I already had on the character. And I think I often wonder, because I was so suspicious of Marky, I wasn't always paying as much attention to Akechi as I probably should have. At least after the whole palace and everything. And so I wonder if I had been new to Royal, if I would have ever been thrown off the scent of Akechi at all. Because I'm sure you experienced it. When I played Persona 5, the whole time I'm just thinking, okay, he's obviously a red herring. Where's the real villain? And I'm waiting for that, you know, super secret villain to reveal themselves, which I guess it kind of happens, but it's so obviously Akechi from the beginning, and they never do anything to try to mask the scent, but I guess the twist is that they knew the whole time. And
yeah, I feel like the game definitely expected you as the player to also be suspicious of Akechi, because it's like, you know, the whole gang is like, I mean, yeah, he was obviously the bad guy. I feel like they wouldn't have included, like, that kind of dialogue if they really expected it to be, like, a twist that surprised people.
Right. And so, when you played Persona 5, were you ever disappointed with kind of, like, the ending?
I would say the final, like, kind of gambit running from, like, I think everything from when Akechi betrays you and, like, kind of kills Cognitive Joker to Yaldabaoth, I think, is kind of a mess. I would say, like, the actual ending I wasn't really disappointed with, but
sure,
the last, like, you know, couple palaces and the trip down to Mementos is a little bit kind of hokey.
Yeah, because to me, like, the whole, like you said, kind of the build-up from the reveal of Akechi to all the stuff with Shido, to me, that was always kind of like, bleh, whatever. I mean, Yaldabaoth is kind of given, you know, it's Persona, so... but to me, it was like, oh, I liked the part, you know, where they reveal Igor, and I was like, oh, that explains why the heck he sounds weird.
That was actually a genuinely good twist.
Yes,
the thing
I
with
agree.
Igor being like Yaldabaoth, I thought that was kind of brilliant.
And so a lot of that kind of took the bad taste out of my mouth of kind of why, like, to me, it was like, why even bother having the mystery if you already know it's going to be Akechi? And then they're like, well, we want you to know, but the twist is that the Phantom Thieves knew the whole time. And it's like, well, what do I get out of that, though? So but here's the thing is, the reason I bring this up is because I think as we get into the third semester, that kind of fixes everything for me in terms of, like, you know, an ending that feels more, I don't know, I don't know if I want to say satisfying, but it makes me think more. It makes me feel like I've been provoked a little more to question everything. And so the original, like, reveal of all this, all the villains and everything in Persona 5 was always disappointing to me. But I think one of the best parts of Royal is just that build-up, showing you the original story, kind of how it was originally, and then making you think, well, how the heck does this get from point A to point B? You know, like, there's a third semester, what the heck is that going to entail? And I don't know if somebody who's new playing Royal would pick up on all the same stuff I did when I was playing Persona 5, because there's so much more to focus on or think about. So I'm just always curious about that perspective of a new player. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent.
Yeah, so like I think about the exact same kind of shit too. I don't know. I just find that really interesting. The idea of like how much does your like preconceptions about stuff affect your enjoyment of it? I just find that kind of like thought interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, you say it in a much more succinct way than I do. So now that we're kind of on the topic, we talked a little bit about Shido, or at least I did, and Akechi. So there's all these bosses, a lot of new additions to the bosses. Which one stuck out to you?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure almost all of them. I don't think Shido has really changed very much. I think all of the rest of them aren't they?
Didn't Shido... Was the one-on-one fight with Shido always in?
I don't remember. This is like one of those details that it's like...
I think that's new to Royal.
I don't
the one-on-one part of the battle, where I think it's just regular Shido at the end or something, if I remember right.
Yeah, it's just like buff Shido. Yeah, I don't remember if that happened in the original when he like blasts everybody else away.
I think that's new, if I remember right. Because I actually really enjoyed that part. Because to me, at least for that, to me it was like, oh, cool, you know, it kind of gives Joker that moment to be like one-on-one with the guy who's put you through everything, you know, and I don't know, it even though Shido is, to me, is like the most bland villain of any piece of media I've ever consumed, it really made him feel, it made that point in the battle feel a little more impactful. It made it feel like, okay, this is kind of, you know, Ren's moment to finally get his revenge, and he's doing it himself, and it's payback. And I kind of like that. It may not be much, but I like that they thought enough about that to give it just that little bit of extra oomph to the battle. And then I'm trying to think of some of the other boss battles. I can't remember what was new in... No, Kamoshida, he has the volleyball team, right? He has Shiho and...
I really like Kamoshida's. I really like the part where he's summoning different cognitions, and he brings up Mishima, and whatever Mishima does doesn't work. And then fucking Shadow Kamoshida is like, "Get out of here, you little pissant!"
Yeah, and they just emphasize, and again, I think Kamoshida of base Persona 5 is the strongest villain, and in terms of, you know, how his relationship connects to everybody else, and they really get you to hate Kamoshida.
Yeah, like, I've kind of become desensitized to Kamoshida because, you know, it's been 3 years since I first played Persona 5, so the effect is kind of worn off. But when he rolled up Cognitive Shiho, and she was all dressed up like that kind of feeling of like, oh, you're a scummy guy, kind of resurfaced. So I thought that did a lot to kind of reignite that, man, Kamoshida sucks, that kind of spark in me.
Oh, absolutely. And they did such a good job with Kamoshida that, at least to me, it just makes every subsequent villain, until you get to the very end, obviously, more and more disappointing. Because the way I look at it is Kamoshida's relationship with you, he's so close to you. You see him every day at school. It's a much more personal connection. And as you get further in the game, you know, you start going up higher the ladder of the influence these characters have over, you know, people and the public's cognition, that it becomes more and more impersonal, you know? Aside from, I guess, Joker and Shido, you could make that argument, but still, like, you're not having it constantly reinforced why these characters are terrible and the things they do, and you're investigating all that stuff with Kamoshida, and so I just think Kamoshida has always stood out as a great first villain to really hook you. And then Madarame after that, to me, is just always disappointing. Not necessarily in the battle, but just in general, like the buildup of why you're supposed to hate him and everything. And they do enough to make him a villain, but it was never quite as satisfying defeating Madarame as, you know, Kamoshida. And his battle is updated too.
You can kind of make like a graph in terms of like how much power the like quote unquote the character has over society to how scummy they are and how much you actually want to stop them. And it's kind of interesting, like their power increases, but how much you don't like them just steadily goes down. Like Kamoshida is obviously great. I still really like Madarame. I think he's a pretty nice scum dude, but then then you get to Kaneshiro and it's like, yeah, this is a bad guy, but
right.
I don't really feel like I'm fighting a particular, like, a shitty person, because you can see people like Kamoshida, like, existing, right?
Right, exactly.
And obviously, people like Kaneshiro do exist, but it almost enters this realm of more, like, caricature, I guess, to where it's, like, it's a lot more realistic, the idea that you know a Kamoshida rather than a Kaneshiro.
Absolutely. And I do think that doing these little updates to their boss battles, you know, maybe adds a little bit more to them. Like, for instance, well, so let's think. So I think the update with Madarame is he has the different versions of himself, right? And I can't remember. If I remember right, that to me just made the boss battle feel easier. Because I think they switched it out with something, didn't they? Or maybe it wasn't.
For Madarame, he, like, you fight the first form where he's the couple of different paintings, and then he turns into, like, 5 color-coded copies of himself. They're all linked to different stuff.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And then with I don't know if Kaneshiro had any updates. Like, I just remember
he did, actually. There's the part, like, after you beat the Piggytron, he kind of gets spat out, and then he's like, guess what? I've hired 2 bodyguards. And then, like, this really muscular fly shows up, and, like, some other little fly shows up. And eventually, like, I forget exactly what happens, but Kaneshiro ends up losing all of his money, and then his bodyguards just leave. And I thought that was really funny.
That, you know, I do remember that now that you bring it up. I'd completely forgotten about that. That whole fight, I remember thinking, like, I couldn't remember what was new. And I feel like Kaneshiro is one of those villains where it's like, I loved his design, and I just wanted him to be more. And, you know, he's just, I think everybody's probably at the consensus that he may be the weakest of the villains in terms of character. And then who's next? You have is it Futaba's Palace after that?
Futaba's after that.
And I don't remember what was new about that battle.
I don't remember either. Like, I think the fight more or less played out the same way. There's probably some difference. I just don't recall.
You know, one thing I noticed the second time through Futaba's Palace was I didn't realize how much time you spend building up Futaba as a character. And I assume it's because she's the only one that has her own palace. Yeah. And you just spend so much time, like, learning about her and stuff. And I'm like, man, I never thought about that. Like, it's almost unequal to any of the other main party members. And it just surprised me going through that again, how much time and cutscenes and stuff between you getting to know Futaba and outside of cutscenes that you spend with her. But after that, you have, was it Okumura?
Yeah, Okumura? Okay, I will make probably not a hot take. I think Shadow Okumura in Royal is the worst Persona boss fight I've ever dealt with.
Tell me about it. Yes.
Beyond just, like, Persona, I think, like, in any RPG, I don't think there's ever been a boss that just made me think, like, what?
It's stupid. That's the thing. It's not an intuitive boss battle. It's not actually making you, like, if I remember right, it's not really making you strategize. It's just putting you in a precarious situation to put you in a precarious situation.
It's real.
Right.
But it's like, I feel like that fight doesn't work within the context of the baton pass system, because, like, Shadow Madarame got it right, and that's what's so weird about it, is the fact that, like, you know, all the Madarame clones are weak to a different thing. So the idea is you hit one with Garu, and then you baton pass and hit the other one with Zio, and you repeat that cycle, and then you hit Madarame. And you would think the idea do that, but all of the bots are only weak to one thing. So it doesn't really work. You're just, I don't know what you're expected to do. I learned this trick. This is the most ass-backwards thing I've ever seen in any RPG, where increasing the difficulty makes it easier.
Yeah, I heard about this. I think that's what I ended up doing, if I remember right.
Yeah, like, somebody told me like, oh, you should switch it to Merciless, and I thought, yeah, that's pretty funny. Like you're a smart guy, and then he was like, no, legitimately, that helps because what happens is all of the damage done by everybody increases. So even though you're getting your ass beat harder, it's easier to deal out that damage you need to just get to those next phases.
Right. Yeah. If I remember right, that's what I did because I was like trying to figure out. I'm like, man, I keep dying on. I can't remember if it's the blue guys or the green guys, and it was driving me nuts. And so I was like, man, I must just not be good at this. And so I looked it up and I saw that same strategy about Merciless, and it briefly explained like, oh, it just works because the multipliers and everything increase. And I was like, okay, sounds easy enough. And then first try after that, it was over. If I remember right, I think my friend, when she was telling me about it, 'cause she did it on just normal, and I think she just was using a bunch of items to keep the string going or whatever, and use weaknesses.
Yeah, that was
and
my
everything.
original strategy. Was just like, okay, I'll just use some of those elemental damage items, and maybe that'll help. But it doesn't really, at least for me, because it's like most of the time they were already downed when you use that. So it's like it's kind of just.
Yeah, that boss battle was incredibly frustrating. I don't think I'll ever forget going through that boss battle and the repeated dialogue from Robot Haru each time.
Oh my god, every time Robo Haru spoke, or the Akuma was like, oh, this, that, whatever. I was like, shut up, stop talking, please.
He's like, I see no flaws in my father's
just the
logic.
same dialogue over and over and over.
Yeah, that one was rough. Funny enough, like, that was the only one that I can think of that really felt like just stupid. Like, that's the only word I can think of.
Yeah, I want to know, like, what happened with the playtesting for that fight. If we're just, like, idiots and everybody they had testing it was just like, yeah, seems fine. Because, like, I don't get it. It's just not... It doesn't really conform to the battle system that they're trying to work with.
Right, exactly. That was my big concern, too. And, I mean, eventually got through it, and obviously you did too, and I didn't really think much of it beyond that, but when I think back on it each time, it is perplexing.
And it's funny because, like, the Okuma fight in the original was more or less widely regarded as probably the worst boss fight, but it's like, it was... I don't know, I kind of like the sort of comedy that it brought of just like Okuma kind of just being this pitiful guy who just sicks his lackeys on you. I thought that worked for his character, even though it wasn't like a great fight. It was like, it fit the character, but this is just kind of frustrating. Like, I would always rather be bored than be frustrated,
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, because I think it makes you just more resistant to wanting to do it again. And then, again, like I said, like, I don't think there are any other bosses like it. And who even is after? Is it straight into Shido? No, Sae.
Yeah,
right?
Sai's palace is after that.
And I don't remember the updates. Well, I remember her palace is significantly... I think it's her palace. They cut out all sorts of stuff, if I remember right.
Did they?
They cut out, like, a big portion of the maze. If I'm remembering correctly, and I didn't know this until my friend pointed it out, and she was like, yeah, that maze was like, they cut out like 2 portions of it or something, and I'm like, really? So I could be wrong on that, but from what I understand, they cut out quite a bit of the maze portion, and so her palace is now, I guess, quite a bit shorter. But then again, it's been 3 years, so I'm not sure 100% on that.
Yeah, some of the details of the minutia of it all is a little bit, it's kind of escaped me,
Yeah, and her fight, I know there was a change, but I don't know if I remember what it was.
It's the big roulette wheel.
Right. And there's the whole, like, you have to figure out how she's cheating, and then I honestly don't remember much beyond that.
In the original, I think you just did the thing where you find out how she's cheating, you send somebody to shoot at the thing, and then it kind of just becomes a straight fight. Whereas in Royal, there's another roulette element where she'll kind of cycle through different elements and stuff.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, I do remember that now. Yeah, I remember getting through that fight my first time, but I don't remember if it was difficult or not.
She beat me once. The thing landed on, like, I guess what's her ultimate attack, sort of roulette choice, and she just slaughtered me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds about right. And I think yeah, if I remember right, because again, I was talking to my friend, and I think she struggled with that one, because I remember seeing that specifically, landing on the ultimate attack. And then I guess from there it's you get onto the ship, Shido's ship, right? You have the whole thing. Oh no, well I guess you have the whole thing with Akechi.
Right.
And you do run into him on the ship, and because I don't remember, is there any difference in the whole scene where they expose Akechi?
I'm pretty sure it's basically the same.
Yeah.
The only thing that's really changed is, like I said, the very end of his confidant, where he's like, "Oh, hold on to your glove for you," but I'm pretty sure everything else is untouched.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is they give you that glove, and they keep like referencing it and bringing it up and making you remember that Akechi still owes you that duel or whatever, which actually goes all the way until the end. And it's I guess an interesting enough way of stringing you along. But I can't remember if Akechi's battle itself has anything new to it.
I'm pretty sure it was the same. I don't remember there being anything that was like, oh, that's new.
Yeah. So yeah, that plays out, if I remember right, just as like you said, because you get the glove and you can talk to him and ask him like, hey, remember that duel? You still owe me that duel. And then of course you go through. We already talked about Shido's boss battle. Did we miss anything along the way?
I don't think so. I think that's all the major fights and palaces.
Yeah. So I think aside from that, I think the one last thing at least that we can talk about with the base game or base part of Persona 5 Royal is there's all sorts of new music.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any tracks in particular that you like really liked or go back and listen to? I know there's a lot of later songs.
I don't know if this is heresy or what, but I think I actually like Take Over more than Last Surprise now.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, because, like, at least for me, I really enjoyed Last Surprise. I'd say that's probably my second favorite Persona battle theme. But Take Over is just so much more kind of smooth when you get into the battle, Like, that initial part in Last Surprise where it's like, da-da-da-da-da-da-da, does get, like, sort of grating after a while.
Yeah.
But with Take Over, it's that nice kind of like, da-da-da. So I find that's just more kind of enjoyable to get into a battle with. Like, most of the time the battle is over before the singing starts anyway, so...
Right. Yeah, no, you have a good point. I think you're completely right where Last Surprise, by the, 300th time you're listening to it, you're like, okay, all right, whatever. But what I did like about having Takeover as the main theme for your battles and everything was whenever you would get that regular battle when someone, because it wasn't when somebody would sneak up on you, you would get
it's when
Last
you
Surprise.
fail an ambush, and I think that like certain, just certain scripted encounters have it.
Right. And so for me, when I would get Last Surprise, it made it like, oh, this is great. Now I can, it made it almost a reverse to what the song did to me the first time, where now I was grateful to hear Last Surprise. Not that I dislike Takeover. I think I still do prefer Last Surprise, but Takeover definitely is a welcome change, I would say.
Yeah, it's nice just having that kind of diversity in the music every now and again.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this. What's your opinion on the opening? Like, not just the song, but the actual animation and everything, too.
I like the opening. I feel like it's kind of, it's a little bit all over the place. I get the kind of theming of what they're going for, of, like, taking the hammers and smashing, like, society or whatever it may be. But, I don't know. I just feel like, the original opening did a much better job kind of conveying, like, the thief aspect and the kind of covert nature of the Phantom Thieves, but... No, I do like Colors Flying High a lot. I really like the song, especially.
Yeah, I think, to me, yeah, like you said, I think the song is probably my favorite part of it. The animation, like, it always bothered me when it cuts to Kasumi and because they're like, okay, now we're going to have her do this really complex movement, and it's so choppy, and you can't follow what the heck she's doing, And every time I watch that opening, for some reason, that scene in particular always bothers me. There's something about, I don't know the studio who they have do all their animation, but I mean, I massively prefer the original opening just in terms, you know, the animation just seems so much more smooth. And like you said, it also conveys the theme. There's so many colors and everything flying in your face in Royal because it's all the new updated stuff. I guess kind of like Persona 5 or Persona 4 Golden. They introduce all those colors and yeah, it's definitely something. Funny enough, like I've seen the opening for Scramble, and I think that opening is a perfect like sequel. It feels connected to the first opening, and I really like that opening. But Royal, just I don't know, something about it. Kind of, it's always bothered me. I don't know why, but the song's great, and I guess that's all that really matters. And then I think my favorite new music. For some reason, I've always just I really like the relaxing music, and so what is it, the Real and the Ideal Maruki's theme?
Ideal and the Real.
Ideal and the Real, yeah, that's it. I love that one.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
And it's just and they do this other like reprise of it at the very end, and it's really striking. I just like the both versions of it, but especially the you know final one that they do. But we can get into that. Aside from that, was there anything in the base game that you wanted to touch on?
Yes. So one of my favorite little additions is the hangouts you can do with Caroline and Justine. I really enjoyed having those because like the strength confidant I think kind of sucks. It's like it has an interesting idea going for it where they're talking about how they used to be Lavenza, but it's like it's kind of just 10 ranks of slowly building up to the same thing. And it does an okay job kind of fleshing out Caroline and Justine, but it's like I wanted to hang out with them, you know? Mm-hmm. So being able to just be like, yeah, inmate, you're taking us to the museum. It's like, yes, absolutely. Of course I am. So I thought those were great.
This is just me. There were a lot of people who are like, I cannot believe that you can take Caroline and Justine on dates. And I'm like, it's not dates though. It's no different than when you would take, you know, Elizabeth or Marie around and you were just showing them what real life was like.
You're essentially just babysitting.
Right, exactly.
You take them to McDonald's and they get Happy Meals. Like...
That's right. I forgot about that. And so to me, it's like, if people feel that way, I just think people just aren't fun or they want to try to bastardize what it actually is. And again, it's like one of the things where it's like, I just like being able to take that time and get to know characters that you otherwise wouldn't really get much of a deeper understanding of. And it's just, you know, it's always for, a lot of times they just play it for comic relief too. So yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think I maxed out or did everything with them. I know I got... I know I did, like, the aquarium, and I did, like you said, McDonald's, and you... there are a few other ones I did with them, but did you max them out?
I did not. Well, I maxed out their confidant, but I didn't do all of the little hangouts. There's a couple where, like, the timing is kind of strict, and it's like, there's always so much other stuff to do. It's kind of like, do I want to hang out with this person or go hang out with the twins? And
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, some of them kind of just slip out of your grasp.
Yeah. I remember being so thrown off, because don't they text you or something? You get, like, a message from them?
Yeah, at some points they're like, hey, inmate, don't forget about our deal.
That always threw me off when you would get stuff from them. And also, like, when you get stuff from Lavenza eventually, too. That was always like, whoa, this is weird. But yeah, I honestly, I think... There's so many additions you could go on and talk about. And I'm sure we've still barely scratched the surface on some stuff. Like, you know, you have Kichi Joji and that stuff's all great, but it's, you know, just kind of an addendum to the original story. And, you know, I think most of what really attracted me to the game was just that mystery of that third semester. However,
yeah, definitely.
We are going to talk about that in part 2.
Yep.
And that's going to be over on Fither's channel, so make sure to go and check that out. And we will see you then.